The Sanatorium. Diary of an Investigator. Chapter 5. The Ground Floor. We cautiously made our way up the wooden staircase. I took the lead, shotgun at the ready, while Mrs. Stevens McCormick held the oil lamp. At the top, the stairs opened into a laundry room. The first thing we noticed was an open door to the right that led outside, apparently the back entrance of the sanatorium. Cool night air was drifting in. It wasn't until a second glance that I realized the door wasn't just open, it was completely missing. The hinges dangled torn and twisted from the splintered door frame. That's when I noticed her, a woman sitting motionless on the floor, blending in with the darkness. She was wearing a maid's uniform, leaning with her back against a tumble dryer right in front of the shattered door, staring blankly into space. I was just about to speak to her when I suddenly froze. What was wrong with her legs? A wave of dizziness washed over me. Mrs. Stevens McCormick, who had just come up the stairs behind me, let out a scream and jumped back down to the last step. Thankfully, she didn't drop the lamp. I continued to stare, transfixed, at the maid's legs. In a trance, I walked over to get a closer look. The skin and flesh had withered away, clinging to the bones like brittle parchment scorched by unseen flames. The sight reminded me of an Egyptian mummy. A short stretch of her thighs still looked normal, but then her legs transitioned into this horrifying state without any open wounds or visible blood. I had absolutely no idea how such injuries could have happened. I looked around. Directly opposite the destroyed door was a security door, just like the one in the foyer, apparently leading from the other side into the hallway with the patient rooms on the ground floor. If one were to draw a straight line between the shattered outer door and this reinforced door, the woman's legs would have crossed that line. So, assuming something had moved from the hallway toward the outside, possibly so fast that it had torn the rear door off its hinges, then whatever it was would have had to pass over the woman's legs, right where her injuries were. But what on earth could that have been? Some kind of chemical? I'd seen my share of things during my service in the Great War and knew what chemical weapons could do, but I'd never seen anything like this. Besides, the security door was completely intact. And the woman must have already been sitting on the ground before she was injured. But why would she have chosen to sit in that exact spot? Once again, I was faced with a mystery. In any case, she was still alive, and we urgently needed to help her. I returned to Mrs. Stevens McCormick. Fortunately, she had recovered enough to help me carry the maid. We decided to take her to one of the bedrooms upstairs near the foyer and then call for Dr. Tiller. Since neither of us wanted to touch her withered legs, Mrs. Stevens McCormick and I each slipped an arm under the clearly traumatized woman's shoulders and carefully lifted her up. With a brittle crack, like two dead branches snapping, the maid's legs detached from her thighs and remained on the floor. To this day, I don't know how Mrs. Stevens McCormick and I managed not to run away screaming at that moment. Somehow, we kept our composure and carried the woman down the stairs without casting another glance at her legs. When we finally reached one of the bedrooms, we laid the maid on the bed and covered her with a blanket. Then I hurried to the library to fetch Dr. Tiller. He, too, had never seen injuries like that before and couldn't explain what might have caused them. He tried to stabilize the young woman, but of course her legs were beyond saving. She doesn't seem to have lost much blood, but whether she'll survive, only time will tell, he told us. What was certain was that she was in deep shock. Whether, and if so when, she might come out of it was anyone's guess. so we decided to leave her to rest for now and return to the others in the library. By now we were all deeply unsettled. Based on the personnel files we had found, it was clear that we had yet to locate the two nurses, Bobby Birch and Charles Johnson. There were also still the patients who were supposed to be housed on the ground floor. "How should we proceed?" I asked the group. "The others might still be alive and injured." Father Benedict set aside the file he had been reading. "You're right. In that case, we can't afford to waste any more time," he agreed. We decided to search the ground floor immediately. Only Dr. Tiller chose not to join us. He preferred to stay in the library and continue studying the patient files. We gathered in the foyer in front of the door to the patient wing. I readied my shotgun and Mrs. Stevens McCormick drew her rapier. Lady Gordon searched for the right key on the ring we had found in Dr. Brewer's office, carefully turned it in the lock, and pressed down the handle. We held our breath as Lady Gordon slowly opened the door. The scene before us resembled that of the upper floor, a dimly lit hallway illuminated by turned-down oil lamps, with a security door leading to the laundry room we already knew at the far end. Several doors lined the walls here as well, some of them ajar. Additionally, the hallway opened up just beyond the entrance on the right into a small room, though we couldn't yet see inside. Everything was silent. At any moment we expected to be attacked by the murderer or one of the patients. After a few tense heartbeats, we finally dared to take the first step forward and peered into the alcove that opened to our right. There we found a desk and a chair, with one of the orderlies seated on it. It took me a moment to realize what was wrong with the scene. The orderly's body sat slumped toward the window, but his lifeless, empty eyes were staring straight at us. His head had been completely twisted backward. Once again I felt panic rising in me, which I managed to suppress only with great effort. The others were visibly shaken by the discovery of yet another corpse, as I could tell from their pale faces, but fortunately everyone kept their composure. Perhaps we had become numb enough by now to endure such sights more easily, I'm not sure. Directly opposite, on the left wall of the corridor, was the first closed door. Since it bore no label indicating a patient room, we didn't expect any danger. In fact, the room behind it turned out to be a storage closet. A similar closed and unmarked door on the right wall of the corridor concealed a spacious janitor's closet with a sink. Both rooms were windowless. We now approached the first open door on the left side, which was a security door labeled E1, Blanche's room. Cautiously, we peeked inside and saw a small but comfortably furnished space, with a large wardrobe that included a built-in desk, a sofa and a bed. The room even had its own small bathroom with a toilet and shower. The only thing that slightly disrupted the cozy atmosphere was the barred window. Blanche was there too. She was lying on the bed, asleep. On the desk we spotted another key ring, which Blanche had apparently used and then left there. I signaled to the others to wait outside, quietly crept into the room, and managed to take the key ring without waking Blanche. However, as I turned to silently leave the room, she must have sensed something. Suddenly she bolted upright and let out a scream. I rushed out and slammed the door shut behind me. Thankfully it could only be opened from the outside. Within moments Blanche hurled herself against the door, her fists battering the wood with desperate, frantic blows. "Let me out!" she shrieked, the words rising in a fevered animal howl. We quickly found the right key, locked the door just to be safe, and breathed a sigh of relief. If Blanche really was the murderer, then she was now trapped. But any sense of calm was now gone. Blanche continued to shriek like a banshee and hammer furiously on the door. Armed with a keyring and a shotgun, we approached the door diagonally across the hall, labeled E4, which meant it must belong to a patient we hadn't met yet, Henry Adam Barber. This room too was furnished and equipped in a similarly cozy manner as Blanche's. On the bed, to the right of the door, lay a figure. As we cautiously shone the light into the room, he lifted his head and hissed, "Get out! And close the door, for heaven's sake! No one can sleep with all that racket." We didn't need to be told twice. We pulled the door shut and locked it, then turned our attention back to the hallway. Next on the left was patient room E2, which, according to the files, was assigned to Colonel Billings. Sure enough, he was there, sitting in a wheelchair and staring out the window into the darkness. "Colonel Billings, how wonderful to see you!" I called out, hurrying over to him, overjoyed that he appeared to be unharmed. However, he did not react at all, staring straight through me with vacant eyes, as if gazing into a world long lost to him. "Major William Manock, commanding officer of the 2nd Reconnaissance Squadron," I introduced myself, stating my full rank and name, and saluted him. That seemed to rouse him from his daze. He lifted his head and looked at me. Then, suddenly he threw both arms into the air and shouted, "Charge!" It was only then that I noticed Colonel Billings had completely wet himself. I stared at the puddle beneath his wheelchair, struck by the sight. So this was what had become of the man I had grown to admire during my training, of the man to whom I owed my entire military career, a drooling old man who could no longer make it to the toilet on his own. I had come here hoping I might still be able to help him somehow, perhaps by reminding him of a few old stories. But it was now painfully clear that he was in a far worse state than I had imagined. With a mixture of pity, sorrow, and profound disappointment, I led Colonel Billings to the bathroom, cleaned him up, and helped him into a fresh pair of trousers. When we left the bathroom, someone had already cleaned the wheelchair and mopped the floor. We led the colonel gently in his bed, covered him, and let him sleep. Then we left the room and locked the door behind us. I had to pull myself together. After all, far more pressing matters still awaited us, not least the one remaining patient. We continued down the hallway to the next door on the right, E5, according to the records, the room of Mrs. Cecil Randolph. We had barely approached the door when sudden screams rang out from within, a woman's voice crying for help. We rushed the final few steps, and before we could reach the handle, the patient came bursting out in a blind panic. She was a woman of middle age, wrapped in a fur coat, wearing high heels and a cloche hat, dressed as though she were about to attend a night at the dance hall. "There are bad creatures outside my window! I saw them with my own eyes!" she cried, her whole body trembling violently. I could only hope she was wrong. After all we'd seen that day, I was prepared to believe almost anything. I stepped to the window and saw nothing but darkness. Thank God. With some soft words and patience, the woman eventually calmed down. At last, we escorted her back to her room and locked the door behind her. The last patient room, E3, in fact contained nothing but a bare bed frame, just as the patient files had indicated. With that, we had fully explored the ground floor and returned to the library to report our encounters with the patients to Dr. Tiller. "It is of utmost importance that we review the patient records as quickly as possible," he remarked. "They most certainly require specific medication and must be treated according to their conditions. What you experienced may already be a consequence of inadequate medication." We agreed with him, but first we wanted to address another matter. To the best of our knowledge, we had thoroughly searched every room in the sanatorium, yet we had only found one of the nurses dead. Where was the other one? First, we needed to determine the dead man's identity. To that end, we carefully searched all the bedrooms on the upper floor once more, as well as the sleeping quarters in the basement, but found no clues that could tell us whether the dead nurse was Bobby Birch or Charles Johnson. Yet, during our search, something else caught our attention. In the bedroom with a double bed, which likely belonged to Dr. Brewer, we discovered a pair of worn feminine slippers tucked beneath the bed. We could not fathom to whom they might have belonged. To the best of our knowledge, Dr. Brewer was a confirmed bachelor. Could there perhaps be yet another missing person? No one, of course, could say for certain. At least we had more success with a young lady who still sat steadfastly in the library, engrossed in her book. Since we had already encountered Mrs. Randolph and Blanche in their respective rooms, she could only be Darlene. There were no other female patients. Thus we were able to escort her to her room and lock her in, though, of course, not without allowing her to bring her book along. After all the turmoil, we realized with some surprise how fiercely our stomachs were growling. We hastily prepared a makeshift supper, then each of us grabbed a patient file and began to read. Sleep would have been impossible in any case. It was just past midnight when Father Benedict suddenly stiffened. "Something's out there," he told us in a worried voice. He crossed the room in 2 strides, threw open the window, and then we all heard it. A scream, raw and desperate, slicing through the darkness. Somewhere out on the island, a man was begging the night to spare his life. To be continued in Chapter 6, The First Night.